Now, our last panel of this morning before we have a keynote and then a break is all about stakeholder coordination and thinking about partnerships. So this is what the UN, I know all of us have been to many events this week talking about the importance of cross-sector participation and digital partnerships and ultimately just working together and figuring out how to get this thing done. So on that note, I'd like to welcome my boss, Payal Dalal, our EVP here at the Mastercard Center for Inclusive Growth, EVP of Global Programs, and our panelists. We have the Assistant Undersecretary for Sustainable Development of the Ministry of Sustainable Development of the Kingdom of Bahrain, Imad Hamzah. We also have Dr. Uyi Stewart, again, because he's such a good speaker, from data.org. We're also really excited to welcome a couple of folks for the first time to this summit, Fred Swaniker, the founder and CEO of SAN Technologies. And last but not least, we also have Kamal Sahu, Chief of Sustainable Finance of the AVPN. Thank you and welcome.
Hello, good morning, everyone. Delighted all of you are here and that you've made it and survived an entire week of UNGA. We are going to have a fantastic conversation, and I'm so privileged to moderate a conversation around the infrastructure of impact. We speak so much about physical infrastructure, digital infrastructure, but what about that soft infrastructure that is required to really accelerate impact? And when I say soft infrastructure, I mean partnerships and coordination and collaboration. And I've got a terrific panel. Shanna just laid out who they are, so I won't repeat, but you can see that they really represent every pillar that's necessary to create an inclusive and sustainable digital ecosystem. And so we're going to have a conversation about the role of civil society, philanthropy, government, and innovators to really understand how we all play together to drive that collective impact. So I'm going to start with a little bit of rapid fire for our panelists, bring up a little bit of the energy here. And I want to start, Uyi, with you. In 75 seconds, do we have an effective and impactful data and AI ecosystem at the moment?
No and yes. No, because from the technology perspective, even the best performing foundational models still fail when you put them in domains. So technically, we are not there yet. But from an ecosystem or stakeholder perspective, there is some hope there.
Daniel just talked about Uyi and pragmatic optimism. There you go. There's live pragmatic optimism. Yes and no. Donna, tell me what you think, where we are. Do we have it?
So I think I'll echo what Uyi just said. It's a yes and a no because in order for you to have an effective AI ecosystem, you need good data. You need good quality and quantity of data. And when the Ministry of Sustainable Development was first established in June of 2022, one of the first plans that the ministry put in place was how do we fix the data on the SDGs? How do we ensure that our data on sustainable development really reflects the level of development that Bahrain is in? And when we did that, when we embarked on that journey, we saw that it's not really just a problem of fixing the data, ensuring that we tick the boxes, know who's supposed to do what, but we need interoperability. We need systems that can easily speak to each other. And I know that there are a lot of initiatives that are currently underway. IMF is working on StatGBT, which I think is great. It's definitely going to have that interoperability between different UN entities, World Bank and IMF, to ensure that the data is available and could be easily readable and captured.
Terrific. Thank you for highlighting that example. It's always helpful to know what the use cases out there are. Fred, I want to come to you with a rapid fire question. What's one thing that's working and one thing that's missing when it comes to the right AI ecosystem?
So one thing that I believe is working is awareness around AI and its potential, which generative AI and large language models have made aware, people who are, I would say, lay people that didn't quite understand power of AI suddenly can get it. Your grandmother knows how to use ChatGPT now. But what's not working is that people have suddenly forgotten that AI has been around for 40 years and that there's a lot of other tools before large language models. And so large language models are almost like a hammer looking for a nail. and it's not actually relevant for the problems. And so I think for me, it's about actually starting with the problems that we need to solve, and then figuring out what the relevant technologies are. And sometimes LLMs are good, but there's a lot of power in many of the good old AI techniques that have been around for 40 years, which we are now suddenly forgetting. And you look at a driverless car driving around San Francisco, and then they're like, oh, that's not AI because it's not using generative AI. What do you mean that's not AI? So,
Really helpful. Thank you for keeping it real, Fred. Kamal, I want you to also touch on what's working and what's missing when it comes to inclusive AI ecosystems.
So if we're a social network, a members network, and headquartered out of Singapore, we look at, as our mission as an organization is to move capital towards impact. Many of our members have access to data because they're large organizations and have put models and metrics in place. However, when we think as a philanthropic focused organization, we look at things from a theory of change point of view. It's very easy to measure outputs. Those metrics can easily be captured. It's tough to measure outcomes. So there is still not enough data around outcomes of all the impact work that our organization is doing, and we will welcome AI being able to support us with that.
I think that's an acute challenge for most people in the social impact ecosystem, really being able to measure, articulate, and then iterate based on real-time data. Thank you, Kamal. Fred, I want to start with you with kind of more lengthy questions and answers, and really get into the substance in the interview here. You're an amazing innovator, and Sand Technologies is doing fantastic work around the world. And you've really achieved scale. Talk us through how you've managed to do that. Again, the kind of central theme and thread for this conversation is partnerships. So what's your secret sauce in getting partnerships to work and to actually achieve the scale and the impact that you and Sand Technologies have had?
Well, maybe just to give a context of the scale. So we've raised $1.5 billion in the last decade. And today we're training about 300,000 software engineers across Africa. And we built a company called Sand Technologies that leverage some of that talent to solve problems. And in doing that, one thing we've learned about partnerships is that, you need to have alignment of vision and values. There needs to be trust. There needs to be clarity around roles and responsibilities, in particular around decision making. And then it needs to be win-win, right? So that it's not just one-sided. And finally, there needs to be aligned incentives and things like that. So those are some of the things that we've learned that makes successful partnerships.
And Fred, could you tell us a little bit about one of the partnerships you're most proud of or most bullish about?
Yeah, one of the partnerships I'm really excited about is in Rwanda. We are doing a large-scale digital health project. Now, about a year and a half ago, I had this vision of, I said the future of healthcare is about leveraging AI in rural areas where a nurse or a community healthcare worker can be equipped with and supercharged to do all this diagnostics and so forth. And I had this vision of launching it with a clinic in a box, and we're going to set up one container and we'll test this. And I met someone who had been the co-founder of Zipline. And he's like, hey, I actually know an NGO that you can work with that has 300 clinics that can get you to national scale immediately, right? So we then partnered with this clinic, with this NGO called Societies for Family Health. And so instead of having, a pilot in one box, we were suddenly national scale in 300 clinics around the country to do our. So that became our proof of concept. And we then brought in Starlink to provide high-speed bandwidth to the clinics. And then we brought in the Ministry of Health, obviously. And then we were able to get funding from a large global funder that, funds in the public health space. And we partner with the local provider of electronic medical records. And Zipline also came in for drone delivery. Now today, when you go to Rwanda, you can walk into a health intelligence center for the Minister of Health, and they can see real time what's going on in the entire system. How many babies were born yesterday? What is the disease burden by district? You can start to see early signs of a pandemic. It's shifted the entire healthcare system from being reactive and expensive to being more predictive and preventative, and at large scale. And you're able to go in and see a community healthcare worker using AI-enabled devices to do more sophisticated diagnosis and things like that. And that, all in the matter of a year and a half, would not have been possible if we hadn't leveraged all these partnerships.
That is absolutely astonishing in terms of the speed, the scale, and frankly, the ability to really embed preparedness and resilience into the health system. Thank you so much for sharing, Fred. Donna, I want to come to you. We've heard a really great example of a partnership and some of the secret recipe ingredients to the partnership recipe from Fred. You live in the policy and advocacy world, and you play a really unique role being in the Kingdom of Bahrain in the government. Talk us through how you're looking at building an inclusive AI ecosystem through policy and partnerships and coordination.
So what's unique about the mix that we have at the Ministry of Sustainable Development is that we don't really step into anyone's shoes when it comes to health. We know that we have the Ministry of Health that's handling the data and the initiatives on health. We have the Ministry of Education that's handling education. But the beauty of having a ministry that's dedicated for sustainable development is that coordination role, which is key. Because we get to identify what the challenges are, what the gaps are, and the opportunities. And we try to do that by partnering with the right international organizations and with the private sector. So what we've been doing over the past couple of months is we've been having SDG by SDG workshops, bringing in all custodian agencies, whether being UN or non-UN, with all governmental entities within Bahrain to tap into all of the indicators and all of the data that's required for each of the SDGs and ensure that we're not just ticking boxes, but we're also tapping into what new technologies can I use? How can I tap into big data? How can I use artificial intelligence to extract the same amount of data in a better, more efficient and more effective way? And we've been finding this to be very fruitful. We're coming up with action plans, with ideas, and just having everyone together in one place makes it so much easier. So some of the coming up workshops that we're doing on a national level are on research and development. How can I really start to capture expenditure on R&D by tapping into all of the different sectors from the public and private sector, and what kind of data is going to be needed? And you wouldn't be able to do that alone. You need the help and the support from the government level, but you need to have everyone on board also from the private sector. And we're also trying to look into other things like the impact of climate and the environment on health. So we need to also start capturing that to see what would really make sense for a country like Bahrain. What kind of a blueprint do we need to be able to measure specific indicators, whether it being air pollution, humidity, heat waves, you name it. So we're trying to do that, and we're trying to work with both the WHO and with UNEP, bringing in also all of the other entities on board. But what's really been very impactful for us that can really help us with the capitalizing the most on the power of data is that we have a national task force on information and population in Bahrain. It is chaired by the Minister of Cabinet Affairs, and it is co-chaired by the Minister of Sustainable Development, and has members across 25 governmental entities in Bahrain. We meet on a regular basis. We discuss everything that has to do with accuracy of data, availability of data, what new best practices and standards do we need to adopt. One of the most recent initiatives was just a few weeks ago, we launched the Bahrain's National Summary Data Page, which is one of the IMF's requirements to comply with the IMF's data standards initiatives. And it's really helped us populate our numbers in SDMX format, and this is going to be the next step. We need to make sure that our data is available in machine-readable format, and that's, again, a building block for AI, and that's another partnership.
That's fantastic, and I think, to your point, there's such need for someone to take on ownership of coordination and standard setting and consistent approaches. And so it sounds like in Bahrain, you've got a blueprint and a template that many other governments can follow so that we can really harness that power of data, because I think right now it's so fragmented.
Absolutely.
I want to come to you. We've heard from Fred and Donna about some specific initiatives happening in Bahrain and Rwanda, but I want to kind of zoom out a little bit and talk about the ecosystem, and really understand from your perspective what it's going to take to build a resilient and equitable AI ecosystem with innovators like Fred, with policymakers and government officials like Donna. What's needed?
Thank you, Payal. And Fred and Donna set me up really nicely.
It's almost like we planned it, Uyi. It's almost like we planned it.
I was nodding to everything they were saying, right? So I think of ecosystem more from the perspective of biological ecosystem, which is really where we borrow the word from, right? So more loosely, that is conceived as a complex, interconnected network of organisms living together, right? So when you bring that into the work that we do in AI and in solutioning, right, you ask yourself, what is one good example out there, and what can we extrapolate from that good example? Now, I'm going to personalize this. I used to work in the public health space. My favorite example is the Global Alliance for Vaccine and Immunization. They've done fantastic work, and I'll tell you why I think that's a good one, right? So 1 billion vaccinations, right, that have been distributed around the world, especially in low middle income countries, 78 countries. And they've, in the last 20 years, we used to have about 10 million kids die every year before the 5th birthday because of lack of vaccination and immunization. Because of the work of Gavi, that's been reduced to less than half. I mean, that's still too much, by the way. But however, imagine if that wasn't done. That's a good example of what an ecosystem that's working out there. And there's so many things that they do, but let me extrapolate that into 3, right? Of course, the elephant in the room, funding, right? Funding. And in their model, it's a PPP, right? Public-private partnerships. And I'm going to bring that back in. We need that, and we often don't explore that enough. And I'm going to show why that is relevant for AI, especially in this state. So that's number 1. The second that I will extrapolate is this modular structure that de-risks point of failure. That's important. Otherwise, when you bring partners together and you're not thinking about alignment and you're not risking point of failure, it's going to crash. And then finally, I think, Donna, you talked about it, is this idea of a champion, a coordinator, what at data.org we call the ecosystem designer, someone who goes to bed thinking about how can we keep the ecosystem working together. Those are, for me, the 3 things that work. Just, can I put a plug in for my organization, by the way?
Okay.
Because essentially, that's what we do. Right? So in the space of capacity building, which is hard, is durational, right? It's hard work. But we do this by, brick by brick, working with organizations. I was in the meeting just now as we were prepping for this, and I heard, Fred, you're already building a capacity in Africa? What is your network? Can we bring that in? Because it's about partnerships, right? And aligning so that you can basically de-risk those points of failure. That's what we do at data.org, and we have a tall order. Is that by the year 2032, through partnerships, right, bringing this ecosystem together, that would have trained 1 million purpose-driven data scientists by 2032.
Amazing. Hopefully you harness Fred's 300,000.
Absolutely.
In that 1 million. You heard it here, a partnership between Sand Technologies and data.org. Late breaking news. Komal, I want to come to you and maybe ask you a question where Uyi started, which was funding. What's the role of philanthropy in all of this, in this ecosystem building, and how does philanthropy play alongside innovators, policymakers, and civil society?
So this has been critical for us to look at as an organization. We've been around for about 12 years. We wanted to know the impact of our impact because we're moving capital towards impact, but how do we measure that impact? So we actually partnered with an organization called Impact Intelligence that had, used AI technology to look at social media, look at traditional media to figure out what exactly our members are doing. And Mastercard is a member of ours as well, to look at how are they mobilizing this capital, whether it's in grants, whether it's in debt, whether it's in equity. So they actually sifted through 1.8 million articles to figure out, to decide, to discern what are the underserved sectors. We actually created a dashboard around that, which is on our website, to just actually sift through and identify what impact has been created by us as an organization, as well as our 600 members for APAC. And that's been a useful tool for us for our members also to learn how can they do things better. The other thing we partnered on, and again, philanthropy has a major role to play. AI is not just for the privileged North, but it's also for the global South. And it's there to stay. So Google.org and ADB have partnered with us. We've got a 15 million grant funding from them with view to training up the marginalized communities to learn about AI. What does it mean for them? If you think about a lot of the South, especially countries like India, Philippines, there are a lot of call centers, data centers, and that's a source of foreign reserves for the country. What does it mean when AI comes? Do those jobs get lost? How do we benefit a smallholder farmer with AI? Is there technology that he can leverage? So we're partnered with Google.org with view to training the trainers who can then further disseminate this learning. We're using basic modules that Google.org has created. And obviously I see a partnership opportunity here as well for us to learn from what's being done in Africa, and could some of that be brought into Asia as well. So great opportunity for us to then work in 8 different geographies, train the trainers, and see how we can impact marginalized communities so that they can learn about AI and build skills for the future.
Fantastic. It sounds like there's a really large role for philanthropy to play beyond just financing, really ensuring that there's an inclusive lens to the AI ecosystem, and also making sure that resources are equitably distributed so that there aren't glaring gaps that might enable that point of failure that Uyi talked about. I know it's so amazing, this conversation, but we're starting to come up on time, so I'm going to ask each of the panelists to leave you with a call to action, given you all are headed to a coffee break soon. So Uyi, I'm gonna start with you. What do you want this audience to do?
To the funders in the room, hint, Payal and others, that we do need to start to consider when we give grants, this role of a coordinator-in-chief, right? Someone plays that role, and we expect it to be done, but when in the granting process, there's never a line item there for an ecosystem designer. We need that, right? And that's my main plug. But one more is, Iqbal said it, is so we need to approach this work, everyone in this room, with humility, right? And bring the local communities in, both in the design and in the development.
Fantastic. So Uyi's in the market for a coordinator-in-chief, if anybody would like to volunteer. Donna, what is your call to action?
I think it's definitely going to be to integrate youth into the conversation. So one of the recent examples is that we actually partnered with Mastercard in launching a university challenge on financial inclusion for the SDGs. And shout out to Shamina. Shamina is coming to Bahrain in a few days, and she is basically going to be one of our special judges on the final pitch. And it's just amazing how we opened up the space through this challenge for university students in Bahrain to just really think outside the box, use financial inclusion, digitalization, AI, and technology as an accelerator towards further expanding the power of financial inclusion in Bahrain. And it's amazing how we were touching upon this earlier, on the interdisciplinary approach. We saw a lot of students studying medicine, mathematics, computer engineering, all are coming up with these innovative ideas, coming up with AI-based solutions to help people with disabilities, help create health apps. And it's just amazing how just making sure that you have the data available, make sure that the youth are also have that space to innovate, and that's a building block to an effective AI ecosystem.
Amazing. Youth being the effective building block of the AI ecosystem. You heard it here first. Kamal, what is your call to action to the audience?
I think democratize data. Don't hold on to it. It enables us to take action. Without access to that data equity that was referred to earlier today, it is impossible to solve many of the problems we need to in the global South.
So we need to remember the fundamentals. It might be really exciting and glittery to go straight to Gen AI, but actually, before we do that, we need to focus on data maturity and data capacity. Fred, your closing call to action for this amazing audience.
I would say start with the problem, not the technology. Do hard things. We're investing a lot in this technology. There's financial research, costs, environmental costs, and so forth. Let's make sure it's worth it. Let's solve the really hard, important problems in the world. And go beyond chatbots. And then finally, move beyond generative AI and LLMs. There's a lot more other techniques that have been around for 40 years. Open your eyes and let's not be too laser focused on this one technology.
I think I have the title for our next panel discussion amongst the four of us next year. Do the hard stuff, forget about the chatbots. Thank you so much to Fred, Donna, Uyi, and Komal for an amazing discussion. I'm going to hand it back over to Shanna to take you through our next session.